So let me get this straight. Mike Flanagan finally makes a show that sets up for a season 2 and Netflix doesn't give him one? If you haven't heard by now, The Midnight Club is not getting a second season. The news came out this last weekend around the same time that Mike Flanagan announced he had signed some deal with Amazon Prime Video, so I don't know if the two things are related, but we're not getting to see all the answers that would be in store for a second season. I wasn't surprised by this news. I didn't think this show was going to get a second season. I didn't think the show was going to be 2 seasons. I went into it thinking it would be 1 season. So the fact that it was set up for a second season and then it didn't get one is kind of disappointing. True to his word, he did put them in a blog post on Tumblr, so I'm going to run through what he gave us. I will also link it in the description. The season would start with Amesh getting sicker. In season 1, he had survived his death date, but he would be the first one to tell a story, and it would be like a love story kind of reflecting what's going on between him and Natski. And their relationship would play out for like a few episodes, but eventually he's gonna die and everyone's gonna be sad. Ilonka would spend some time kind of like wondering how Julia Jane fooled her, which like, yeah girl, how? But then she'd also be kind of like worried about Kevin because she's falling more in love with him, of course. And then he's probably a little sicker than he lets on. And I think she kind of like senses that. So she's worried about him. And to get him to stick around a little longer, she starts telling a story in like small parts. And that's going to span like 5 episodes. And the story she tells is based on like Pike's story, Remember Me, which is about a girl being pushed off a balcony and waking up as a ghost, and then trying to navigate the world to figure out who killed her, like to try and solve her own murder. But instead of Ilonka playing the main character like they do in all the other stories, it would be Anya. Because, quote, "This is how we live on, isn't it? In the minds of those we leave behind. Even if a character dies, as long as they're remembered by the members of the club, they live on in their stories." Which is nice until all those members who remember them die. But okay, we're not gonna worry about that. As Ilonka's telling her story over a few episodes, Amesh dies. The janitor's talking to him before and he's like comforting him, and then the shadow engulfs him. And it's like, okay, the shadow is death. Like we saw it in the first season and then we're seeing it now, the shadow is death. After Amesh passes, a new girl comes in and she's going to be Ilonka's new roommate, and just like Anya was to Ilonka, Ilonka's going to be kind of cold to her. She's going to be standoffish. She's going to be kind of like defensive and like territorial, and she doesn't want her to join the club. But then of course she warms up to her and then they become friends, and it's just like Anya was to her, she is now to this new girl. When the new girl joins, something exciting is happening. Sherry's telling a story, which is the first time she's told a story. I would have been interested to know what that story was, but oh well. Because of the new HIV treatment that came around in the 90s, Spence's prognosis is no longer terminal. He gets to actually go home. He gets to leave Brightcliff, just like Sandra did in season 1. Then Natski dies. Again, the janitor's talking to her, comforting her, and the shadow engulfs her. And then we find out a little bit about Dr. Stanton. I think the first season ended with her like taking off a wig and she's got like a Paragon tattoo, and we're like, oh, what's that about? Is she sucking the life out of these kids? No, she was Athena. She was in the cult. Her mother was a say-so. She wrote the Paragon journal, and she kind of like saw what her mother was becoming and she didn't like it, and she didn't like the cult, so she kind of turned on her. And then when her mother left, she took over Brightcliff and tried to like turn it into a place that would like help people and, you know, be a safe place for these terminal patients. She's bald because she's going through chemo. She has cancer. But then it goes into remission. The treatment worked, and that's something she kind of has to like reconcile with, because like she's running this place where all these kids come because their treatment didn't work and they're going to die. But then here she is recovering from her illness, which is probably a hard thing, but we don't get to watch it play out. Okay. And then Kevin dies, of course. He was going to. And he's probably with the janitor and then the shadow. And then Ilonka dies, and she's talking to the janitor, and it turns out he is death. And then the shadow is actually like themselves, and it's like this sense of understanding and stuff to help them to move on to the next place or whatever. And in Ilonka's experience of that understanding, she finds out that she's like a reincarnation of Stanley Oscar Freeland, the guy who built Brightcliff, and Kevin was a reincarnation of his wife. That's why she sees the guy when she looks in the mirror. She sees the Old Cataracts Woman when she looks at Kevin. That's why when Kevin first sees her, he's like, do I know you? And it's like, yeah, there's soulmates. It's a whole thing. I guess when the woman was getting older, she was developing dementia and she was forgetting to feed herself, which is why she'd walk around like, I'm so hungry. And then the old man, he like drew this maze on the ground for her to like navigate to try and like help her cognitive functioning, which I think is in the basement, which is why Kevin kept ending up there, because as the reincarnation of the old woman, he was like drawn to that basement where there was this labyrinth for him to walk, and that's why he would sleepwalk down there. And so as Ilonka is experiencing this, she's kind of like understanding like, oh, I don't have to be afraid of death because I'll just be reincarnated and me and Kevin will find each other again because we're soulmates and that's what's going to keep happening. And I don't know how I feel about that, because if the whole point is for her to face her mortality and finally come to terms with dying, why is she then going to be reincarnated? I get it in the way that it would follow the story that they're basing it off of, and I understand the soulmates aspect, but like, she's not afraid of dying because she'll just be reincarnated. That's seems like a shortcut or like a cop-out, or I don't know what word that would be, but it's like, wait a second, you can't come to terms with dying and everything ending and then find out like, oh, actually it's not going to end. It's just going to start again. That's not fair. That's not how, like, it's fine. It's a show. It's not a show. It was canceled, but I don't know. I don't fully understand, like, thematically the whole, if her whole thing is about accepting that she's going to die, and then in these final moments when she's going to die, this shadow engulfs her and she understands that she's not really going to die. That seems like it undoes any of that character growth of like accepting your fate, because then you get a new fate where you get to live on. I don't know. It's fine. I don't have to watch it because it's not going to be made. I am a little disappointed because whatever I might have said in the last video, I would have liked to watch this stuff play out because I did like the kids and them telling their stories, and I would have liked to see more of that. I'm not heartbroken that we're not getting another season, but it is a little bit like, seriously, you set up a second season and then we're not getting one. I do appreciate the answers because I still get upset thinking about how I won't know what's going to happen in the OA. That was canceled years ago, and I don't know where that story was going to go, and it drives me crazy. So I do appreciate that we got all these answers of what would have happened. I do like that little bit of closure for us. I don't have Amazon Prime Video, but I have access to it, so I am excited to see what Mike Flanagan makes over there. Sorry, Netflix, not really. If you're not going to renew his shows on your platform, I'm going to go watch them on a different one.